Welcome to episode 60 of Working Towards Our Purpose. Thank you for being here. In today's episode, we are going to talk about discipline. But before we get into that, we're going to have our normal check-in with ourselves. So take a moment and check in with yourself, with your thoughts. How are you treating yourself? How are you talking to yourself this morning? For me, I think a little bit mixed. I feel a little bit good and bad, if that makes sense. Yesterday I had a pretty good day. I was on my friend's inaugural podcast, and that was pretty cool. It was a cool experience to be interviewed. I haven't done that in a while, so that was kind of cool. And definitely we'll let you know when that comes out so you could support my friend Young Lee. And got into some writing yesterday, feeling pretty good about some writing, so I felt good about that. And then kind of woke up, it was freezing this morning, went for a cold run. Just as I was planning for the episode, feeling a little bit of self-doubt, and sort of combating that, and then also thinking about yesterday. And I think it's okay to be both. I think always sort of battling that self-doubt. And today is not an exception. So I think sometimes it takes discipline to realize that it's sort of an old ingrained pattern, a self-belief that is sort of making you feel that way, is making me feel that way. So you got to kind of push through it sometimes and recognize that it's not a personality trait. It's just kind of a way you feel. So that is a long answer to how I'm feeling today. But sometimes that's what you need. So today's episode, we're talking about discipline. And I think this kind of comes as a follow-up to the past few episodes where we were talking about self-love and being kind to yourself. And I think sometimes people can think that if you're being kind to yourself, then you won't get anything done because you need to be disciplined and hard on yourself. So I kind of wanted to break that down today and to talk about that. So first off, what does discipline mean? What is discipline? I think there's two different ways you can think about discipline. One of them being scolding a child for doing something wrong, right? I think if you ask some parents, hitting a child is a form of discipline, maybe not socially accepted anymore. Punishing, yelling, putting a child in timeout is a form of discipline. Some people feel that that's necessary to show a kid right from wrong. I'm not a parent, so I guess I can't really speak to that topic too much, although I do have my beliefs. But that's one form of discipline, being hard on yourself and being mean. That I don't agree with that necessarily. The other sort of discipline that I'm thinking of is being consistent, showing up no matter how you feel, making sure that you're putting in effort and being consistent. So I think that one of them is sort of negative and one of them is a lot more positive. And to me, I think that discipline can be a good thing and it also can be a bad thing. So, I think there's two differences there. I'm not saying that any of them are, wrong, I guess, inherently, but I do always tend to focus more on the positive thing instead of the negative thing. So that being said, I think in the discussion today of discipline, I think I want to talk more about how can we show up for ourselves and how can we be consistent even if we don't feel good. So that's kind of the context of discipline. I also want to talk about how discipline, it's kind of nuanced, I think. I think when I was younger, I thought that I had to have discipline for everything. I think that when you're in school, there's always teachers telling you you have to be disciplined, you have to study, you have to work hard. at every subject, at math, English, whatever it is, because that's what you have to do to get good grades. That's what you have to do to pass. Go to college, you got to be disciplined in your major, and then you get into the workforce, and you got to be disciplined from to your boss or whatever it is that you're doing at work. And yeah, it's just sort of this blanket, like you have to be disciplined for everything. And another thing that comes up if you're not in like the corporate setting, entrepreneurialism is definitely, there's a lot of people yelling at you online saying you need to do this, you need to wake up at 5, you need to, do these 10 different things every single day. In the fitness space, there's you have to work out every day, you have to do this every day, you have to be disciplined. So yeah, there's just a lot of people yelling at you to do something like regimented in order to like be successful. And I think although those could be good things, I think we have to think about like how we're applying discipline, and do we need to be disciplined in everything? And I don't think that we do. I think that not a lot of times in my past did I ever think about like, why am I being disciplined for something? And when it came to like engineering school, it was, I didn't want to fail. So I was disciplined and I, got through it, and it seemed extremely difficult at the time. And I did not like it very much. There was parts of it I liked, but a lot of it was really hard and I wouldn't want to do it again. So thinking about like, how do we apply discipline? And basically what I'm getting at is I think it's a myth to have to apply discipline to everything. I think some kids aren't good at math and they shouldn't have to be disciplined to excel at math when it's just not what they're into. And, I guess you got to get through school at some point, but once you become an adult and you're in the adult world and you get to decide what you want to do with your life and you get to choose how you spend your time and where you want to put your work, I think that we don't really need to be disciplined in every aspect. And really like finding the thing that we want to be disciplined is kind of like what I've been doing. And let me talk more specifically. I feel like I'm getting a little too abstract here. Let me talk about my experience because that's what I know. So yeah, school didn't feel good for me. Once I got to the engineering world, it didn't feel good for me. I tried to be disciplined at first and like do really well and stay late, and I worked more than 8 hours a day, and I came in on weekends sometimes, and it never paid off for me, and I never enjoyed it. Like it never felt good. So eventually I realized like engineering wasn't for me. So it made sense that I, didn't want to be disciplined for that. But then once I got into leaving that engineering world and I had a business, I then became disciplined with myself on business stuff. And I started listening to like everybody online who talks about business and who tells you should be doing this and you should be doing that. And I was very all over the place with what I did because I didn't really have a direction. I didn't think about like what I was doing. I was only listening to what looked like successful people who had a business say I should do. So I was very confused. I did a lot of things that didn't make sense. I put a lot of time into things that I really didn't need to be. And eventually I found out that business wasn't right for me and the business that I created wasn't right for me. So now I finally feel like I have something to where I should be disciplined in, to where I want to be disciplined in. And that for me is huge. And so before I get into like explaining that, I want to like give this very simple analogy that maybe you've heard before. But it's, if there's a plane that's flying from the East Coast to the West Coast, if it picks a direction to get to LA, say from Hartford, and just flies in that direction and doesn't correct course the whole way, there's obviously tons of winds and even if you set the perfect angle from Hartford to LA, you would be so far off course because they didn't course correct at all. But if you course correct along the way, which is what planes do, they're always course correcting because of different winds and, stuff I don't understand, because it needs to constantly see where it's at and readjust. I feel like a lot of times, with thinking about what we want to do, we make a decision one time and just like set our sights on it, and we're like, yeah, we're going to do that. I was in high school. I decided I wanted to be an engineer for, reasons that weren't very good, mostly outside influences. And I closed my eyes and I went through engineering school, and then I worked in engineering for 6 years. So I spent 10 years of my life doing this thing that I didn't know really why I was doing it. I didn't really spend a whole lot of time thinking about that decision or making that decision. So it makes sense that it kind of didn't really work out. And I don't say that in a regretful way, but I say that in a way of like thinking about what we're doing. And so if we bring this back to discipline, hopefully this makes sense and you're following me. If you bring back to discipline, like we can't just apply discipline blanket statement to everything because we're going to end up far off course. But if we really hone in on something and find something that we want to be disciplined for, now we can apply discipline and like multiply our success. We could double down on what we're doing because we feel like really confident about that being the right choice. And I think that that's the thing that gets missed a lot when we talk about discipline. It's, do we feel like we're doing something that rings true to us? And if it is, then we can be disciplined. But anything else, I feel like, it doesn't make sense to be disciplined. So yeah, getting back to the story of like me now and applying discipline. I feel like this podcast is something that feels true to me in this moment. And it feels like something that I want to work really hard at. And it has been something that I've done that with. I have worked really hard at it, and I am proud of like what I've been able to build. When we're on episode 60, that's a cool number. It's I've done it for a while. I'm doing 2 episodes a week. We're on YouTube, Substack. Like I'm really proud of the system that I've built to be able to spread the podcast out and to see growth. And I've seen growth on YouTube, and it's been cool to like really show up for myself in this way and to be disciplined, and not in a negative, harsh, self-critical way, but in a, hey, maybe you don't feel as good as you need to today, but we're going to show up anyway way, if that makes sense. So there's a difference. One of them is self-supporting, and one of them is like tearing yourself down. So hopefully that makes sense. And hopefully that like strikes a chord, because it really does for me, and I'm still trying to figure out how to articulate that well. But that's the best that I have right now. And yeah, that brings me to this quote in this book here, the Book of Dharma. I've talked about it before, by Simon Haas. One of the 4 principles of Dharma is discipline. And when I first got to that, I was like, discipline? Ooh, I don't know if I like agree with that. I don't know if I like that. But then when I read through the chapter, I was like, oh, okay. It really like helped me synthesize my experience of discipline, and to be able to articulate it in a way now to where I see discipline not as a beating of yourself up, but as a supporting of yourself. And there's just a quote in here that I want to read that I think really helped define discipline. And this is how the quote goes, again, from the Book of Dharma. Discipline is about subjecting ourselves willingly to fire. However, fire doesn't mean pressure exerted on us by others against our will. Rather, it means the fire of passion that burns in the inner chamber of our being. So to me, again, it's not we're not being disciplined by the outside pressures of other people, but by the thing that we feel true to as our calling, as, anything in the moment that we feel like strongly about. So yeah, that's just, I think that really rang true for me. And that brings us to the next section of this episode, I think. So how do you know like what you should be disciplined in? Like how do you know like the thing, should you be disciplined in it or should you not? And I think you can ask yourself one question is like, whatever it is, the thing that you're thinking about being disciplined in, who are you doing it for? Are you, and not necessarily who are you doing it for, but like, are you doing it for the right reasons? And what I mean by that is like, yeah, who are you doing it for? Who are you doing it for? Sorry, I had a weird noise in my voice there. So yeah, the one question is, are you doing it for the right reasons? And what I mean by that is, who are you doing it for? Are you doing it for someone else? Are you doing it for prestige? Are you doing it for money or maybe a title? Or are you doing it from something that comes from within you and something that you feel is true? And I think if you can say confidently that like, I believe this to be true and this is what I want, then yeah, be disciplined. But if it's a no, then you don't need to be disciplined. And if it's a maybe, I would also say don't be disciplined, because I think it's not until you figure out that thing for sure that you want to be disciplined. Because again, you don't want to be on that airplane, set your sights and not think about it. You want to know that you're confident in doing this thing before you hunker down and work hard and, you know, ignore the distractions and really be disciplined with yourself. And yeah, I think like, I don't know, I think if I thought about that in my younger years, I would have been in a much different spot. And again, not to say that in like a regretful way, I needed to learn all the experiences that I had. But I think if I were to like tell somebody, you know, at a younger age who was thinking about like going to school or you know, taking a job or starting a business or starting a YouTube channel, I think that like, that's the thing, like make sure that like, it's this thing that's like a fire in you, and then be as disciplined as you want. But anything else is kind of just a distraction, really. And yeah, I don't know. Let me know what you think about that. Let me know in the comments. I feel like for me, it's sort of like eye-opening and like black and white. I don't know if I want to say that, but it's obvious to me now that like this thing that I'm doing, the podcast, the working towards our purpose, like this is the thing I should be disciplined on. And now with like the clearness of understanding of that, I can look back at everything else and be like, yeah, I didn't really need to work that hard at any of that other stuff. And yeah, that's sort of what I want to say about it. So, you know, I do feel like I could articulate this idea a little bit better, but that's what I got for you today. And let me know what you think of it. Go to YouTube, you can leave a comment, and yeah, I will see you in another episode real soon. Thank you for listening. As always, you can go to workingtowardsourpurpose.com to leave a feedback form if you want to tell me what you think about discipline. And you can also get some Working Towards Our Purpose merch, and you can follow Working Towards Our Purpose on Substack for some more reading and writing about purpose. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you on another episode real soon. Take care.